Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way. This is Finding Human with Sue Jacksson. Stay tuned for the next hour as Sue explores the human psyche, what makes us tick, and how to live better, more fulfilled and more meaningful lives. Only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jacksson, and my guest today is Hilton Rosenthal. And we are on Skype from Australia to Australia, and he has already got me laughing. So by a few hand signs that he was sending me. But I first of all just want to welcome you, Hilton, and thank our mutual friends, the Erwigs, for actually putting us in contact with each other.
Thank you, Sue, and thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to a nice chat.
I'm also really looking forward to it. Hilton is a man of many talents. He is an executive, a music producer, a publisher, a music publisher, producer, an online music pioneer. And he was brought up in South Africa initially, and then left for America, and then for Sydney, where he is now. But he actually has so many incredible, well-known people that he has worked with, especially Johnny Clegg. He produced both his albums, all his albums actually. You worked with Savuka and Jaluka. And Hilton, you initially were studying to be an accountant. Now, did you find that very exciting?
I was doing a BCom, and I did some work, some summer work at an accountant's office. And after a couple of boring days, not to say that I disparage accountants in any way. Some of my best friends are accountants. But I was called by our agent. I was playing semi-professionally while I was at university, playing at different nights and on weekends in a duo called Hilton and Howard. And Morris Fresco, our agent, phoned and said, "Do you want to go on a trip for 3 weeks around the Mauritius, Seychelles, Madagascar, etc. And all you have to do is work half an hour a day, and the rest of the time can be a holiday, and we'll pay you." I don't remember the amount, but certainly much more than I was earning or that I could be earning. And I said yes, and I then said I wouldn't be an accountant, but I was going to go and work after I finished my BCom for a few years and then do an MBA. But I ended up going to Gramophone Record Company, which was part of the Gallo Group, and I never left the music business.
And from there, you are incredibly well known, Hilton, for other things for many people that you've worked with. You worked with Paul Simon on his Graceland project. You worked together on that. Harry Belafonte, you worked with him with his Paradise in Gazankula. And Carole King, her in concert. That was in 1994, I think.
Yeah, 1994, yeah.
And you also worked with Le Bohème, and you put him in contact with Hans Zimmer. And you also wrote with Hans Zimmer for Power of One, the music for that. And according to Le Bohème, he was working for you. He said he was on the streets at the time when he arrived at you. You were in Los Angeles at the time. Tell me a little bit about that.
I didn't write anything with Hans. I would never dare to be considered any kind of equal of Hans's.
You produced with him.
I had been working on, I was the music supervisor for the Power of One movie. And I hired Hans for that. And in the interim, I was sitting in my studio in LA, and my secretary came in and said, "There's two guys at the back door that want to meet you." So I went there, and there were these two little guys who introduced themselves. "I'm Ron Kuneni, and I'm Lebo Maraki. We're ANC, a few refugee students here in LA, and we'd like to make some music." And Solly Letwaba, who was Johnny Clegg's bass player, had told them to come and see me. So I said, "Okay, guys, I'll do you a favor, and I'll give you a few days of free studio time, do some demos, and we'll see what happens from there." So they did the demos, and at the end, I wasn't sure what I could really do with them at all. But then when we were working on Power of One, Hans said to me, listen, I need an African lyricist because, this scene here, scene ABC, needs some African lyrics, and it's going to be a big choral. I'm going to hire a 60-piece choir, etc., etc. Do you have anybody in mind? And I thought, maybe I'll take Lebo down to have a chat with Hans, and that was the beginning of all that. I mean, that was Power of One, and then, of course, the next thing they did together was The Lion King.
The Lion King, absolutely amazing. I think what you don't understand, perhaps, or maybe you do, but you just might not say so, is the power that music actually does bring. We called our program The Power of Freedom. But, I received a message from a friend, Jenny Prangley, and she said, it is music and dancing that make me at peace with the world. And that was from Mandela. Do you feel that way about music?
Absolutely. I remember as a kid lying on the floor, just listening to A Whiter Shade of Pale, which was banned in South Africa at the time, and Lord knows why. And songs like that, and just basically drifting into another universe. And there was just such a love for what I was hearing. Particularly the 60s was such a rich period of incredible
the
music.
Beatles, and absolutely.
Beatles, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I remember when I first heard the first song on that album, on Deja Vu, with the harmonies in the middle. I ran home from Barry Gordon's record store in Killarney to our flat. Said to my mom, I have to have this. You have to give me R5 to buy this album, etc., etc. So it was always a passion, apart from the fact that when I was a kid, I obviously had some stories about music as well.
And do you feel that you have an intuition about what works and what doesn't? Because a lot of, when I was reading through Paul Simon and Harry Belafonte, all of those, a lot of them came to you with ideas. And so was there an intuitive feeling that you actually had about certain things?
I don't think there are certain people through the eras that have been the gods of the music industry side of things. I remember when I first was working for CBS, Goddard Lieberson was probably the original kind of music man in New York. Clive Davis, I don't know if you've seen the documentary on him on Netflix. Those sorts of guys were just incredible musical pioneers. But the story that I think of most is when Thriller sold 25 million copies. I believe that legend has it, or in fact it was true, that Quincy Jones was asked, to what do you attribute the success? And he said, I just do my job, and at the end I stand up and wait for the Lord to walk through the room. So, there's something that inspires all of us, some better than others. I, again, mention others rather than me. But there's clearly an intuition when you hear a song or when you hear a recording as to whether it's going to work or not. And some of that is pure intuition, gut feel, and some of it is just experience.
Your experience, a lot of your experience started here. We'll get back to that in a moment.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
I'm back with Hilton Rosenthal, and I actually mustn't look at you when we go to adverts because you're pulling faces at me. Our topic is music is freedom. He's laughing now, and it's wonderful being back with Hilton. Hilton produced Jaluka and Savuka albums, and in Hilton's words, it doesn't matter where music comes from. It's something that can touch the heart no matter where it emanates from. Is that is what you actually said? And it's beautiful. Do you remember saying it?
I don't remember saying that. There's a lot of things I say I don't remember, especially if it was yesterday. But it sounds like something I could have said. Let's put it that way. Yes,
it was something you said. Now, you and Johnny have got different ideas about how you met. So I was listening to the recording from the Australian South African Film Festival. And I found that actually very interesting, because when you were talking about how you got hold of Muriel, Johnny's mom, and asked her what he was doing, because by that stage you had actually been given the task of doing African music. Is that so?
Yeah, well, I started, the only way I could get a job at the record company when I finished university was in the accounts department, because the industry was very small. And I was promised that spend a year in the accounts department learning the business, and we'll move you somewhere else later. During that year, a lot of my work was done doing royalties for the artists and processing recording fees for the artists. In those days, the black musicians were being paid R5 per side. That is to say, per side of a 7 single. So they would record a 7 single. If there were 2 sides, they would be paid R10 session fee each. Because of that, they used to rehearse. And on one day in particular, I processed fees for 35 sides in a single day. Literally, they were so well rehearsed. They went in, they played the song, they recorded next, in order to inflate their income, basically.
What were the white recorders singers getting at the time?
I can't recall, but it was a different type of scale, because they were working on a 3-hour session fee. Nobody was making a lot of money, but in fact the black musicians were making more that were working that way, because they were recording so many songs. So anyway, when the year came up, I went to my boss and I said, look, I need to get out of here and get into something creative. And he said, well, there isn't really a position for you, but do you have any ideas? And I said, yeah, I think so. I believe that the black music business has been really incorrectly handled, and that we should start looking at developing artists, supporting them, buying them buses, buying them equipment, giving them rehearsal rooms, putting them on the road so that they could basically earn a living outside of just the recordings. And in turn, that would promote our records. So I was given the job of general manager of Isibai Music. And through that, I started understanding and listening to this incredible music, which had been totally foreign to me when I was a kid. When I was a kid, that sort of music was the stuff that was played outside in the backyard on the radio, on Radio Zulu or whatever. And I didn't understand it or really appreciate it until I was living it with these guys. And I then started having this vision that I wanted to do something that combined the music I had grown up with and the music I'd come to love. And I'd been given permission by the guys at CBS Records in New York to have a discretionary budget to do something experimental. And I tried numerous things and nothing was working. And I was starting to get despondent. And one Sunday night, I was sitting at home thinking about this and what am I going to do? And I recalled that I'd seen Johnny and Sipho at the Wits Great Hall in 1973. And in the interim, Muriel, Johnny's mom, had been a promotion lady for our company. So every year or so, she would wander in and say hi to everybody. So I'd met Muriel through that. But, I saw Muriel as a promotion lady that was promoting. She kept talking about her son and can you introduce me? She would talk to my boss and say, can you introduce me to Simon and Garfunkel's manager, Johnny this, Johnny that. That obviously subliminally stuck in my head. And on the Sunday night, I thought, I must call Muriel and see what's happening. And I went to the phone book. I knew she lived somewhere in Yeovil or that sort of area. Looked up M. Pinar and picked up the phone and asked her what was happening. She told me that Johnny was planning to sign a record contract that week, but that he was only doing it because he couldn't find anything else. So what did I want to do? So I explained that I had this vision of mixing different cultures and different music, etc. And she said, well, that's really what John wants to do. Why don't I set up a meeting, tell him to wait, and then you guys can meet and take it from there, see if something goes.
And then, it certainly did. But where did, because when they started traveling, you had a very small budget. So how did they afford to actually go overseas when they first went to England? Where did that money come from?
Well, we'd already had some hits in South Africa by the time we went to England. The first album we put out, I was still at CBS Records, Universal Men. And when I took it to the sales meeting, I was hearing things like, what are you going to do with this? It's too black for whites. It's too white for blacks. We're never going to sell this. Anyway, at that time, Capital Radio had started playing it, although nobody could hear Capital Radio because they were having problems with their transmitters. But we had the first number one. Africa was the first number one on Capital. And that just started a little buzz. And through the year, we were selling a few albums here and there. By the end of that year, I'd left the company and formed my own company. And about 6 months later, I thought I would continue producing Johnny and Sipho for CBS. I got the feeling that they were really not interested. The company wasn't interested. So I approached them and said, I'll buy the album back from them. And I signed Johnny and Sipho direct, and we produced African Litany. And when that came out and Impy and African Sky Blue hit around, then we were starting to sell some records. So then the budget started, expanding somewhat. But our international exposure really started. There was a guy in Germany, a German guy called Sherman Heinig, who was working for an Italian record company. How's this for a multicultural thing? Contacted me and said, I've heard Scatterings of Africa, and I'd love to release it in Italy. Which they did. Nothing happened. But then I got a call from someone who became one of Johnny and my best friends, a guy called John Craig, who had a label called Safari Records at the time in London. They were really a punk label. But John was just a really, really interesting guy, and he loved the record, and he said, listen, I'm going to make this a hit. So it started that he put it out, I think, in January '83, and we got pretty close to the top 40 in England, and he said, come over now, we'll fly you over for promotion. So that's really how the international budget started.
Oh, okay. Now, Scatterings of Africa has an interesting story as well about African voices. So just, do you know what I mean about that? That when you were,
I think
won't you just share that story?
Yeah, well, it's a... that's kind of the link to the Paul Simon project, effectively, because after we'd had a hit in England, and it also was a hit in a couple of Scandinavian countries and in Canada. And then I got a call from Warner Brothers in the States saying we'd like to sign. Now, this was an interesting thing because, the phone was ringing at 3 a.m. in the morning. And it was a guy called Seymour Stein, who was one of the legendary ears, another one of those guys that I would put in the legend category. He had Sire Records, he signed Madonna and many others. Seymour phones at 3 in the morning, says, Hilton, we want to talk to you about Johnny Clegg. And I said, Seymour, it's 3 in the morning. He said, no, it's not. It's 6 o'clock in New York. I said, no, but we have a different time zone, mate. That led to my going to Los Angeles to meet with, at the time, Lenny Waronker, who had just become president of Warner's. And Lenny had produced James Taylor and Randy Newman and a multitude of guys. So I walked into the office and we sat down and he said, well, play me what you got, and I played him Scatterings of Africa. And when the humming came out, he just went, man, I love those African voices. And I just didn't have the heart to tell him that it was basically Clegg, Van Zyl, Rosenthal, and a couple of other guys that were singing with some black guys. But he loved the African voices. I'm not disputing that I'm an African.
Absolutely. So it was the African voices. I loved that story. I really did. And then there was another very interesting story that I heard on your one interview, and that was the going to Zululand for the blessing from the ancestors that Sipho wanted you to do before you went to England. I would love to hear a bit about that.
Yeah. Well, Sip said, listen, I can't go anywhere right now with this project without actually getting a blessing from the ancestors. So you guys all have to come down to my place in Zululand, and we'll see what the ancestors feel about this. So we got in a combi, Johnny's combi. They were doing everything, traveling everywhere, the band in the combi. But Johnny was still, at that point in time, they all had day jobs still. And we finished after work at like 5:30 or 6 in the evening, and we drove down to Sipho's place, Greytown. Arrived at 1, 2 in the morning. And we got to the border of his property, and there was a fence there, and we pulled up, and a little kid came out just in his skins, and he spoke to Johnny, and he went back, and I said to John, "What's happening?" He said, "No, Sipo's coming soon." And we waited 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I don't remember exactly how long, but it was long. And I said to him, "What's going on?" And he said, "Look, Sipo has to show his people that we respect him and that we waited for him here. It wouldn't show the level of respect we have for him." Anyway, eventually Sips came out, and we were ushered into into his ancestral rondavel, which had no electricity. It was a concrete floor, concrete walls with a thatch roof, but a General Electric refrigerator running from a generator. Anyway, and the guy, we were all told to sit around around the walls, and Sipo got into the middle and started saying some chants and rubbing a stick with some brew that he'd made. And he told us that if this bubbled over, the spirits and the ancestors accepted us. And this has happened. And then
fascinating.
A goat was slaughtered, and then I didn't partake, unfortunately or fortunately. But and then we got in the car to drive home. But they gave us these pandlas. They took the goat skin, cut a slit in it, put it on our arms, and we were told that it shouldn't be taken off until it falls off. So we all got in the car, and this uncured stuff was on our arms. We had to drive all the way home with our arms out the window because it was already beginning to smell. And I got home the next day. My dad took a look at this. Now, my dad was, an Eastern European migrant who is a very, very traditional guy in a different sort of tradition.
Yeah.
And this little old Jewish man said to me, "What is this?" And I explained it to him, and he just scratched his head and went, "Well, I don't know what's going on here."
But it must have been a very moving experience, wasn't it?
Totally incredible. I feel honored to have been able to partake in that.
What I hear and what I've read is that you cannot believe how much unity you actually brought into the country. And this message was from Kerry Rubenstein, a wonderful young woman who I know well. And she said that Johnny was her hero. And I don't believe anyone was as awesome. He touched my soul, inspired me, made me feel proud to be a South African, reminded me of my youth, pumping my fist, taught me about my country and its people through stories and song. I loved the feeling of unity at his concerts. And she said she saw Johnny and Jenny towards the end of Johnny's life, and she pumped her arm up and down as she saw them. It was at one of the hospitals. But, do you realize the unity that you actually brought into the country with the songs that you produced?
Well, again, I was just the facilitator. The
it's
bottom
a
line
very big thing.
Beginning, it was Johnny and Sipo, and I think that the message that they had was the beginnings of those real messages, that people could, for the first time, witness what South Africa could become by watching them on stage. So
but you had to believe in them, Hilton.
I certainly did, and I'm proud of it. But I don't really give much thought to the fact that that was because of me that type of unity happened. I really respect that it did, and I'm very happy to be mentioned like that. But as I say, it's not something that I think about from day to day. The one story that always sticks in my mind about that unity was we came back from England after the hit, and all of a sudden the white media started taking notice of Juluka. Of course, you have a hit in England, now you better be serious. Before that we were ignored by the media in South Africa. The black radio stations said we won't play music that's got English in it, in Radio Zulu, etc. Sutu, and the Radio Sutu wouldn't play even the Zulu songs, etc., etc. And of course, Radio 5 and I felt in those days, or Springbok Radio was not really supporting us until this happened. So there was a homecoming concert at Coliseum, and the people were being told by the security guards all the time to sit down. And people would jump up, and they were
mixed? Were they allowed to mix at that stage?
Whether they were allowed to or not, there was never a Juluka concert that was segregated. There were numerous concerts that were closed down because they were unsegregated. But they were mixed. And in fact, there were times when Johnny and Sipho played in the townships where they were arrested, etc., etc. But this was a mixed crowd. And because the people had paid for their seats, the security guards were saying, you cannot stand in your seats. So what had happened was that during the performance, people had gravitated to the sides of the hall. And there were two lines on either side. And when Scatlings came about, they started playing Scatlings, the two lines became conga lines and just started dancing towards each other down the sides of the hall and across the front in front of the stage. And as they got in front of Johnny and Sipho in the middle, the guy on this one side was black, the guy on the other side was white, and the two of them put their arms around each other. And they danced in a circle, and the whole audience went crazy. Those sorts of moments make me realize, yes, there was something to that fact that we did do something.
Wow, that brings tears to my eyes, I must admit. You know, it was during apartheid era when all of this was happening. It was very dark days in South Africa. Were you yourself ever at risk from the security police? You and your family?
Not overtly. When we came back, there was a whole issue with the cultural boycott in England, and they're not allowing us to have work visas to perform on television. And there was a lot of controversy around this. And when I came back from England, the front page, we were allowed eventually to do the final TV show if we gave the money to the anti-apartheid movement, which Johnny and Sipho immediately said yes to. I got home and I was talking to my mom on an illegal mobile phone, not a mobile, but you know, those portable phones.
Yes.
And it was really noisy. So I said, hang on a sec, let me go in and pick up the real phone. And I picked up the main line, and the front page of the Sunday Times that day it said, Juluka gives money to anti-apartheid movement. There was a noise on my phone. From that day until the day I left, I could hear people talking on the other side. They were clearly listening.
So you were being recorded.
I put the phone down. I heard a ping afterwards where the recorder turned off. And it was just very subtle intimidation, shall we say. But I was never, ever, directly threatened by the police.
And when you actually left South Africa, well, how did that feel to you, to actually leave a country that obviously meant a lot to you?
And still does. It was tough. I felt that at the time, I mean, those were really dark days. I remember, I guess we'll talk about it a little more later, but Paul Simon called me and he said, have you seen what's going on there? And I said, well, what are you talking about? And he said, well, there's this lady that's had a burning tire put around her neck. Now, at that time, we hadn't seen that footage. And he described it to me, and he said, really, you should get out of there for your career, etc., etc. It's time that you should leave. And that was the beginnings of, we'd been thinking of leaving anyway. We felt we had young kids, and we were scared about what the future was going to bring. Because I had an opportunity to perhaps work overseas and I'd already got some profile internationally, then it was worth leaving. But, the old cliche of you can take the boy out of Africa, but you can't take Africa out of the boy.
Absolutely. I'm pleased they haven't taken Africa out of the boy. Listen, boy Hilton, just wait a moment. Thank you, Craig.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson. Only on 101.9 High FM.
I am back with Hilton Rosenthal. This is Sue Jackson on Finding Human. And we are discussing Hilton's journey from South Africa to Los Angeles to eventually to Australia, and the people that he met along the way. Before you left, tell me, you said that Paul Simon had said to you, do you know what's going on here? Now, Hilton, how did Paul Simon get to you? How did he come to actually contact you?
I alluded to that a bit earlier, that Paul had done his A Hearts and Bones album with Warner Brothers in the States, and that was the guy that, Lenny Waronker had signed Scatterlings. So Paul had been given a tape by a friend, which was basically a pirate tape that just said accordion jive hits Gumboots #2, something like that. And he fell in love with the first song on the tape and went to Lenny his record company, and said, listen, what do you think? I'd like to do something with this African, do you know anyone who can help me? This is African music. I don't know what the song's called. All I know is where it comes from. Lenny said, I think you should call Hilton. So again, one of the calls at 3 a.m. in the morning, hi, Hilton, will you hold for Lenny? Lenny gets on the phone and says, hey, listen, Paul Simon's got this song. Do you mind if he calls you? And I kind of went, hang on, let me think about it. Paul Simon wants to call me. Yeah, well, okay. Maybe next week. Anyway, so Paul called, and he told me the story, and he told me what it was. He said, can you track down what this song is? So I started doing some scouting around and found out that it was a song by the Boyoyo Boys. The song wasn't called Gumboots, but the album was called Gumboots, and Paul just stuck with the title Gumboots. So anyway, I said, what do you want to do with this? He said, well, can you perhaps get the ability to buy the multi-tracks? These are, would be the 24-track recordings with all the different instruments separated. And I can pay the record company and the artists for it, and try and take some of it out, do what I have to do. And I said, look, that was my job in the first place. At around exactly that time, nobody recorded to multi-track. Everybody just recorded straight to stereo. So there's no ways that you would actually have a multi-track of that, even if people wanted to give it to you. So I said to him, well, I could put the original band together for you. And he said, that's interesting. I said, but what are you going to do with this? And he said, I have no idea. I just love the music. So I was the one who then said, well, why don't you do an album of South African music? And he said, how am I going to do that? I said, let me send you a whole bunch of things. And I sent him about 30 albums. And a couple of months later, he said, I've gone through all this. Why don't you put together a recording session in Johannesburg with the following artists, blah, 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 blah. And that's how it all started.
Unbelievable. And I see he says working behind the scenes in every case was Hilton Rosenthal, the crucial catalyst for world music. So that's and you actually introduced him to many other people as well. And then tell me a bit about Harry Belafonte.
Well, it was a time where we were allowed 500 Rand spending money to go overseas on business. 500 Rand a day. That was the allowance. And that wouldn't buy you the toilet at a decent hotel, effectively, to rent. So I had been approached by a guy called Brad Gelfond, who was an agent at Regency Artists that became part of William Morris. And Brad came to London to watch Jaluka in their first tour, and he signed them as an agent. And through that, I had introduced him to Paul, and he had become Paul's agent for the Graceland tour. So Brad said, look, it's crazy. You must come and stay at my place if you're coming here to work. I was doing regular business trips back and forth. So I was staying at Brad. I woke up one morning. I said to him, I've got this song that we've just recorded about Nelson Mandela called Asimbonanga. And I would love to play it to Harry Belafonte because I hear Belafonte and Sidney Poitier are going to be doing an ABC miniseries on Mandela. So he said, I don't know about the miniseries, but come to the office at 5 o'clock this afternoon. Harry's best friends with Richard Rosenberg, who's my boss, the head of the agency, and he's coming in for a meeting at 5 o'clock. So I went there, and I think Harry was a little bemused at the fact that they were bringing in this white boy that, he knew the background of Graceland, etc. And I said to him, look, you're doing this TV show. Can I play you a song? And he said, sure. And I played him Asimbonanga, and he literally turned around and he went, do you want to produce my next album?
Wow. Gosh.
Effectively, the catalysts that pushed me to move to LA at the time that I did was that I went to see Warner's about my future. And on the way, I had gone through London and I'd signed a contract with EMI to sign Johnny Clegg and Savuka. And then I got to LA and Harry asked me to produce his album. I basically had my first year's work cut out.
Gosh.
That was the catalyst that pushed me to leave at that time.
So behind every great man, there's a family that actually relocates with him.
Yeah, they're the true heroes. That's for sure. My wife Linda and my kids. boy, I don't know how they stuck with me and put up with me. But boy, I owe a lot to her and to the kids.
And they've moved with you, which is amazing. A message came through just now, and it said, Mr. Hilton Rosenthal. It's actually anonymous. It says, Savuka songs gave me hope in darkness and helped me stay in South Africa. Please, can you help us again now? What is your answer to that?
I'm not quite sure.
It's actually a lovely message.
A lovely message. And, just by the way, your comment earlier about how music unifies and inspires people, I cannot tell you through the years how many letters we got at the office addressed to Johnny about how his lyrics and his music had helped people get through the toughest times. Cancer. The irony was that I still always remember this person who said, I've been struggling with chemotherapy and cancer, and Johnny's music is the only thing that gets me through.
Oh, amazing.
So, again, can I help? I don't know what I can do to help particularly, but I do have a project on the go that I'm working on at the moment, which is basically rooted in South Africa, and that is we're working on a movie based on the life of Hugh Masekela.
Oh, how wonderful. We'll get back to that in a minute.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, I'm back with Hilton Rosenthal, music publisher, producer, lyric writer, singer himself. And Hilton, you were telling me about Hugh Masekela, that you're doing a project. What you were about to say, and his relationship with someone. Who was his relationship with?
With Father Trevor Huddleston.
That should be wonderful.
So that's an exciting project which we're in development on now. We're almost ready to roll, and I'm sure that I'm going to be back there at least starting to record, and we'll be filming there next year, hopefully.
Oh, fantastic. Wow, that's so the message goes on of peace and looking at our past and actually recognizing all our parts in it. And I think that's wonderful. Now, I'm going to be told to wrap up shortly, but I just wanted to discuss Concert in the Park, because you were flying over in a helicopter flying back from Bophuthatswana when you saw Ellis Park below. And what did you say when you saw Ellis Park?
What had happened?
You were with Izzy Kirsch.
Yeah, I was. I was listening to 702 the Saturday before that, and they had a telethon for Operation Hunger. And I still remember Pierre de Chamois challenged all other South African artists to give 5 Rand, 10, 25 Rand, whatever it was. And I was sitting thinking, whatever gesture I could do right now, I'm not sure that, I'd like to try and do something bigger. I wonder what I could do. So anyway, as fate has it, and of course, you talk about fortuitous circumstances. It was the Monday or Tuesday right after that, and Izzy called me and he said, we've just opened our station, our transmitters in our new transmitters in Bophuthatswana. And would you like to come up for lunch with me in the helicopter? I said, oh, okay. I wasn't that keen on helicopters, but I was very fond of Izzy. We were, in fact, in certain things, business partners. Or he was a business partner of mine. And we were flying back, and just so happened that we flew over Ellis Park, and that triggered the memory for me. And I went, I heard your telethon on Saturday. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could basically get that place and do a concert with all these artists? So he looked at me and he went, well, I know Louis Late, he's the trustee for Ellis Park, and I can call him this afternoon and find out if he would give us the stadium. And literally that afternoon, Louis Late said yes. I think in the next 3 days, I spent all day on the phone talking to just about every manager, producer, vendor of concert stuff. And every single person but one, who will remain nameless at this point, said, we'll give you everything for free. The only deal with Ellis Park was as long as you pay for the cleaning. So anyway, that one person, I just called up the company, the sound hire company, who used to hire them every week, month for different things. And I said, look, this guy's giving me a hard time. And this person phoned that person and said, listen, you ever want a gig from us again, you do what we're all doing. So literally, it was all put together within a few days. I rushed so quickly that it took me time to get a committee together, which incorporated and was inclusive of the black producers, etc. But that was eventually done as well. And in a way, the rest was history. I mean, you talk about surreal events. We were hoping for 20,000 people, maybe. I remember on the Friday, we had sold 35,000 tickets at the end of Friday business. Concert was on Saturday. Percy Tucker at CompuTicket had given us free ticketing services. And on the Monday, he called me and he said, thanks very much. I did no business on Saturday other than concert in the park. We sold another 75,000 tickets on the morning of Saturday through CompuTicket. We ended up with about 120,000 people in Ellis Park, because what happened, I heard a yell over the security system saying, come to the back gate. And I got there, and there was such a big crowd outside trying to get in. The gate literally came off its hinge. Thankfully, no one was hurt, and a whole lot of other people that just couldn't get tickets got free tickets effectively at that point in time. But, the head of police said to me in the early evening, we have rugby matches here with 30,000 people, and today with 120,000, we've had less incidents of bad behavior than we have normally for a rugby match.
Isn't that beautiful? And Hilton, on that note, I'm being told to wrap up. But, I just wanted to end with this. It says, when the pain penetrates, the music resonates. And I think that's very much of what happened at that concert, that there was a lot of pain. South Africa has gone through a lot of pain. We continue to go through it. But I think as long as the music plays, we can all find a reason to go on. And we're going to be ending with the song Scatterlings of Africa. And thank you so much for being on my program with me. Next year, there's a lot more that I'd like to discuss with you, but we are being told to wrap up. I am going to wrap up. Craig, thanks so much. And thank you, Hilton. I'll be in contact with you as soon as we finish the show.
Thanks very much, Sue. And my last word, halala for Johnny Clegg.
Halala, absolutely. Thank you.